earlier this week, Trump made an announcement that he's going to revoke security clearances for prosecutors and other Biden officials, including people like former Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Attorney General of New York Letitia James, the Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. He singled out people clearly in act of trying to be spiteful and petty and be retributive, because there's really no substantive reason, and there's actually a dangerous reason to do it, and it's going to make us less safe. So he essentially said he's going to revoke the security clearances of several current law enforcement figures and former national security officials. And what is a security clearance? So a security clearance is essentially the FBI or some other sponsoring agency clears you to be able to receive top secret or classified information. And there's different levels of classifications. And at one point, when I was a prosecutor, I worked at the Manhattan DA's office my entire career for about 30 years. And I had top secret security clearance, but it's a whole process that you go through, that, or most people have to go through, where you fill out forms and the FBI interviews you and interviews your family, and they interview your friends and your neighbors, and they do a big deep dive to make sure that you're someone who should have access to our nation's most sensitive information. And that's something that only certain people at the Manhattan DA's office had. Now, of course, the DA, who I worked for at the time, was Cy Vance. The district attorney will always have security clearance, and his very, very top executives, like I was. And then the people who are working on terrorism cases would also have top secret security clearance. And there's even more sensitive information security clearance, even higher than top secret, for the most sensitive information. And so obviously the president controls that, and it's who has access to these documents and this information, and you have to swear to keep the documents safe, and you can only look at them in certain areas, and you can only look at them in certain secure facilities. You can't take pictures of them. I mean, it's having security clearance is a big deal, unlike the way Donald Trump would make it seem, where he kept classified documents in his bathroom, essentially, and just falling onto the floor, where people had access to all of this information, and the general public, pretty much, who came into the club, could go into the ballroom and look in the boxes. That is not how the rest of us had to keep classified information and documents. I mean, you keep it in such a way to keep it safe and secure. And as I said, you have to be vetted to get this clearance. So Alvin Bragg, who took over for Cy Vance in 2012, I believe, no, 2022, I believe, he became the Manhattan DA. I have not worked for Alvin Bragg. I left when Cy Vance left, and he would have obviously gotten security clearance to continue to work on the terrorism cases that the Manhattan DA's office has worked on. And so there are state terrorism charges. Not all terrorist cases are handled by the feds. Some are cases that are brought by the Manhattan DA's office. And they are important cases. It's important that they be able to work on those cases. The Manhattan DA's office handles every single arrest made by the NYPD and gets so much information, so much data during these arrests. It could be for domestic violence. It could be for cybercrime. It could be for jumping the subway turnstile. It could be for anything. You don't know who's going to get arrested and who they might be and what information they might have. You might arrest someone for domestic violence who is an actual terrorist, but you have them on DV charges. And so it might be someone you have an investigation into. You might get their phone in the course of a drug. It might be a drug case, and you get their phone and you learn about a terrorism investigation that is going on that you might have intel into because of that phone. Leads come from so many different places, which is why a long time ago, at least now 15 years ago, the Manhattan DA's office, along with the US Attorney's office and the FBI and the NYPD and other agencies, created this joint terrorism task force, and they all sit on it because everyone knows that these cases touch lots of different places. It could be the Secret Service could come into contact with somebody or get information from the cyber work that they do, or same thing with the FBI or the NYPD or the Manhattan DA's office. It keeps us all safer if you are coordinated, because you just don't know who is going to come across the information or who's going to have information that will help prevent, frankly, terrorism before it actually happens. So it is critical and important, and long-standing been the case, that the Manhattan DA's office, the DA himself, was part of the JTTF, this Joint Terrorism Task Force, works with counterintelligence, and works to help keep us safer. And I'm just going to talk about some of the cases that recent cases that the Manhattan DA's office has done in the terrorism world. So, you heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. So my life goals in my career and beyond require productivity, as you can imagine. But let's be honest, the aging process is not our friend. And when it comes to having the energy that I need to do all the things that I'm doing and productivity, I use Qualia Senolytics. So if someone would have told me that there was a science-backed ingredient that could help me feel 15 years younger in a matter of months, I wouldn't have believed it. But then I tried Qualia Senolytic. And now as we age, those zombie cells, they're called, or senescent cells that our body accumulates, they're sort of worthless, and they accumulate and cause aging, and they're sort of old, worn out cells, and they cause these symptoms of aging like aches and discomfort, slow workout recoveries, sluggish mental and physical energy. And it's like this weird, middle-aged feeling, whatever you want to call it. So it's almost like pruning a tree, the dead leaves off a plant. Qualia Senolytic removes those worn out cells, those senescent cells, to allow for the rest of your cells to thrive in your body. And you just have to do it 2 days a month. The first time I read that, I thought, is that a typo? But it's really just 2 days a month. So this formula is non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and the ingredients are meant to complement one another, factoring in the combined effect of all the ingredients together. There's a 100-day money-back guarantee. It's clinically tested 2-day rejuvenation regimen, and it might hold the key to unlocking your cellular health and revitalizing aging tissues throughout your body. And I really highly recommend that you give it a try. Since I started using Qualia Senolytic, I've had higher energy levels. I feel much younger, and I feel much more productive, enthusiastic, and my brain just feels more sharp, and I have less aches and pains. So resist aging at the cellular level like I do. Try Qualia Senolytic. Go to qualialife.com/mistrial for up to 50% off, and use code mistrial at checkout for an additional 15% off. For your convenience, Qualia Senolytic is also available at select GNC locations near you. That's QUALIA life.com/mistrial for an extra 15% off. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode. In January of 2023, Alvin Bragg, the DA, along with the New York City Police Department's police commissioner, her name was Keechant Sewell, announced the indictment of somebody named Victoria Jacobs for using cryptocurrency to provide financial support to violent terrorist groups operating in Syria. Okay? So they literally were charged with soliciting or providing support for an act of terrorism in the first degree and the crime of terrorism, money laundering, and other charges. It was a 1.5-year-long investigation by the NYPD Intelligence Bureau and the Manhattan DA's Office Counterterrorism Program, which was created by me and Cy Vance in June 2015. Doesn't say me in there, but I'm just telling you, to identify and pursue investigative leads related to homegrown terror plots, extremist activities, and terror financing. So Alvin Bragg says, this is a quote, "This case marks the first time that terrorism financing is being prosecuted in New York State court and is one of the rare cases worldwide where cryptocurrency is alleged to have financed terrorism. This complex case demonstrates the depth of knowledge and resources this office has to combat terrorism and extremism in New York and throughout the globe. I thank our partners for helping root out the terrorists. The police commissioner says international terrorism remains a grave threat to safety and freedom around the world. We remain vigilant and unwavering. It goes on and on, but you can see how important it is for this case for the Manhattan DA's office to be able to handle this type of case, right? This case wouldn't have been brought had it not been for the work that the Manhattan DA's office did in investigating this case, and frankly, as a result, was able to thwart a terrorist attack and stop terror financing. Other cases that were done by the Manhattan DA's office is a radical cleric named Sheikh Abdullah Faisal was convicted by the Manhattan DA's office. Jose Pimentel was another defendant who was sentenced for constructing an improvised explosive device to detonate in Manhattan. Another case in 2013, Ahmed Farhani was sentenced to 10 years after he pled guilty to terror-related charges. A couple other cases, Christopher Brown was somebody who was sentenced in Manhattan in 2024 for possessing a firearm as part of a planned terror attack on the New York Jewish community in 2022, and so that was. That was a big case, and again, that's just in a way a gun case, but it was in further of terrorism, and that came about because of the ability to work in this world and to work in with this counterterrorism group, and to be able to have access to this sensitive information. Another case, white supremacist pled guilty to a race hate murder of Black man in New York. This was another individual. His name was James Harris Jackson, and he killed a gentleman named Timothy Kaufman, and he was a part of a white supremacist group that was more than just a murder case. This was a case of terrorism. It was a domestic terrorism case. And another case, another one was the one I mentioned before, Ahmed Farhani, who he was also plotting to target New York synagogues, and this was back in 2012. So there's not a lot of cases, because terrorism cases are normally done by the feds, yet they are critically important to keeping us safe, to preventing crime, and really, the DA's office has to have access to this information. They have to sit on these task force. They have to learn what is going on, what the trends are, who's associating with who, etc., so that they can also feed information into this and provide information and cooperate as law enforcement does. It keeps all of us safer. So these petty retributive decisions that Donald Trump is making, such as to take away Alvin Bragg's security clearance for no reason whatsoever, is actually going to hurt us and potentially make us less safe. And look, this is Manhattan. Manhattan has been the victim of terror attacks in the past, obviously, and so this isn't just stripping any local prosecutor of his security clearance. This is stripping the Manhattan DA, which is one of the most critical law enforcement positions of keeping New Yorkers safe, and frankly the whole country. So I hope he rethinks this decision. This has real consequences. This isn't one of the ones that just doesn't really matter, like Joe Biden, who doesn't necessarily need security clearance anymore because he's not actively involved in current investigations. I think it's wrong to take away his security clearance, but you could at least make an argument that he doesn't necessarily need it anymore. But it makes no sense to take it away from Alvin Bragg. That's just petty spite, and that is not keeping us safe, and that is not a good decision for this country. So it has real consequences. I'm Karen Friedman-Agnifilo, a co-host on Legal AF, and join us every Wednesday and Saturday with Michael Popak and Ben Meiselas.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.